Chapter 1173. There was one good thing. Supreme Alliance didn't disperse. That meant there was a chance. Feng Yi pushed the glasses on his face, looking very shrewd at this moment. Shui Yaoyao took the opportunity to walk over. Her first thought was to tell His Highness Jiao about her victory. Call back. Feng Yi paused, then shook his head. I can't. Shui Yaoyao stilled, not saying a word. Feng Yi glanced at her, turning to light a cigarette. After taking 2 puffs he said, This time Little Spade contacted me. Yaoyao, it is highly possible that Little Spade won't be coming back for the competition. Even though it might affect your morale, it isn't a bad thing for you to know about it. Prepare for the Asian Cup seriously, and don't think too much about it. Shui Yaoyao thought about it. I still have to wait for her to come back. Feng Yi's smoking hand paused and he smiled slowly. All right. It was just a word. It didn't matter if it was expectation. Regardless of when it was. When they turned back to look at the empty seat in the middle, there would always be a feeling of emptiness in their hearts. At that moment, they would always think about what it would be like when the two of them were there. The clicking sound of the mouse was heard in the club for a long time. But there was no longer the youngster who liked to turn over and help you adjust the computer settings. Shui Yaoyao glanced up. She believed that it wasn't just her. Everyone was waiting for the two of them, including their boss Feng. After the competition, Shui Yaoyao had to pack up. Since it was a live broadcast, she had to do a small platform Q&A session. There was a car parked outside the club. It was a top-notch car on the list, especially the color dark purple. The smooth lines made it look expensive. That car often appeared in some reports, and most of the time, it was always related to some female celebrity, which meant that there wasn't a single person in Jiang City who didn't know this car. The Jiang family. The driver sat in the front, seemingly waiting for someone. He tilted his head to take a look, muttering to himself, Why isn't young master out yet? In fact, young master rarely watched such competitions. Moreover, it wasn't a large-scale competition, it was a live broadcast. Even the arena was very small. The driver didn't understand why young master would go there. Could it be because of Miss? Thinking of this, a smile appeared on the driver's face. It would be great if it was because of the young mistress. The new madam had always been worried that the young master would dislike them. And the atmosphere in the house was never good. Indeed, young master used to dislike young miss no matter how he looked at her. But things were different now. The driver rolled down the window a little more. Inside the club building, the atmosphere at the scene was very lively. After all, Shui Yaoyao had won the match, so this was considered her home ground. However, there was one person sitting there. His entire body seemed to be frozen. There was no expression on his face. His eyes swept over the screen once again. It's playing back. Apart from the match just now, the replay also showed the scene of Shui Yaoyao being hugged and kissed after the match. In the video, the two of them were wearing the same uniform, pure black with the Supreme Alliance logo. They looked at each other and smiled. There was a lot of other content. How many times had she seen Coco beside her? The young master of the Wendy group was said to be an illegitimate child. None of the people Chinemo had poached seemed simple. But that was not the main point. Chapter 1174. Jiangzhou clearly remembered that he had followed his father's instructions to bring her home for the festival. After all, it was the Mid-Autumn Festival. There was no reason not to have a reunion at home. He took time off to sleep, and even moved the meeting to the next morning. But she told him that she had something to do that day and was busy. Jiangzhou didn't mind since he was only completing his mission alone. When he returned home, the atmosphere wasn't right. Perhaps those people thought that he wasn't willing to fetch her. But the festival went on as usual. But there was more food on the table that she liked to eat. Jiangzhou thought about it and took the food. He wanted to send it to her place. He would occasionally see news about this and knew that she was practicing to qualify for the Asian Cup. But who would have thought that before he drove into her neighborhood, he would see her sitting on a bench by the roadside, looking up at the sky, deep in thought. She looked a little lost. Just as he was about to get out of the car, he saw someone walk past her hand. The two seemed to have made an appointment. The person smiled and iced her with his hand. Then he handed her an ice cream cone. It looked like they were on a date. She sat in the same position. Even her face was flushed. He could hear her laughter. Coco, thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would have spent the festival alone pitifully. When she said this, Coco even reached out to stroke the stray hair beside her ear, saying something like, as long as you're happy. Then the two of them sat together and went to play with a passing cat. They smiled and knew each other very well. At that moment, Jiang's grip on the steering wheel tightened bit by bit before gradually releasing it. In the end, he didn't get out of the car or say a word. Instead, he took the opportunity when the red and green traffic lights changed to turn the car in another direction. That day, even he himself didn't know why, but he was very irritated. What did he mean by spending the festival alone pitifully? She was the one who didn't want to go home. The more Jiang's wanted to control himself, the more he recalled the past. That soft fatty would always appear in front of him. He was so irritable that he wanted to argue with his father. And when he was unhappy on the anniversary of his mother's death, she was always there, sitting beside him and listening to him talk about those things. She didn't argue or make a fuss. Every time she saw him, she would be. That was why he had never exposed the fact that she liked him. He had seen that kind of gaze too many times. Of course, he knew what the other party was thinking. He did not intend to respond. Firstly, it was because he had never thought of dating while he was in school. Secondly, all his energy was focused on fighting against his father. He didn't refuse the man's care and the breakfast that was brought over. Jiang's was well aware that everyone had their eyes on his face. But at that time, it was a very ordinary thing. Now that he thought about it, it always made him uncomfortable. At first, it was because her mother walked into their house. Even now, he couldn't tell what was wrong with him. Just by sitting there and looking at the screen, he felt that it was blinding, especially after she was picked up and smiled. In the end, he could no longer sit still. He must be crazy. He didn't even rest and came to watch a live solo. He was probably afraid that Qin Mo's team would lose. But his footsteps seemed to be fixed in place. Chapter 1175. Even though he stood up, many people around him had already shifted their gazes over, including some reporters. Only her attention was on Coco's face. In the past, she had mentioned that she liked younger brothers. Was this the type? Jiang's scoffed, his voice cold. He picked up his phone and walked to the passageway without turning back. But for some reason, he was still frustrated. He didn't want to go home with such emotions, in case there was a group of people guarding against him. To be fair, he had always felt that his father had betrayed his mother. That promise of never marrying into the family was already enough. Jiang's knew that it wasn't appropriate for Mama Shui to take the blame. Over the years, his father had been involved in many affairs outside, but he had never brought them home. Mama Shui was the first. She even married into a prestigious family. Jiang's didn't know how to describe his feelings. Betrayal was his first reaction. As for the rest, this marriage wasn't balanced to begin with. That person had long known that his mother would marry into the family, but hadn't said a word to him. Was it because all the fawning she had done in the past so that she could marry into the family and become his younger sister earlier? After all, the Jiang family was rich. That was indeed his initial thought. But after spending so much time together and seeing the atmosphere in the family, he gradually understood that Mama Shui wasn't that kind of person. It wasn't that she didn't take anything, but she wasn't greedy. When his father was drunk, she would cook noodles in the kitchen and never buy anything from his father, probably because she was worried that he would be angry. Once she married into the family, she signed an agreement that her youngest son wouldn't have a share of the assets. Actually, Jiang's didn't care about the assets, it was obvious. He had long left the Jiang family's sphere of influence, and even his personal assets were larger than the Jiang family's. But she seemed to be worried that he would do this. She had even specially told him that her brother was still young and had never thought about this aspect, asking him not to send her brother overseas. This person never seemed to understand the situation. There were some words that should be said to his father, not to him. Going overseas to further his studies and he didn't like it? Sometimes, Jiang's really didn't know what she was thinking. Forget it, it didn't matter. Just as Jiang's was about to leave, he saw Shui Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao saw him too. She had just come out from the interview, the heat still burning on her face. She was indeed happy after winning the competition. But Shui Yaoyao hadn't expected to see him here. The Jiang family shouldn't have invested in esports. Was he waiting for her? Shui Yaoyao paused and was about to walk. A chuckle came from the other side. Young Master Jiang. It was a female broadcaster. Recently, she had been very popular on the internet. She was different from the others. Whether it was her looks or her style, she was very fairy-like. She was a beauty blogger. She was beautiful even when she was simple and elegant. That was probably why she attracted so many fans. Shui Yaoyao seemed to have understood something. She felt that if she went over now, she would probably disturb him, so she decided to wait here. The female streamer walked past her. She even had a nice fragrance. It wasn't very strong, but it was faint. It seemed to be his taste. Jiang. Chapter 1176. It should be a blessing to be liked by such a girl. And the two of them looked like a good match. Actually, after Shui Yaoyao had calmed down, she felt that he seemed to be very casual when it came to finding girlfriends. Or perhaps he had never acknowledged who was the real deal, and had never put in any feelings, which was why he had always been like this. That was probably the reason. The girl today was worthy of being called a fairy. Shui Yaoyao thought that perhaps he would end his promise with her earlier. After all, that promise wasn't about self-respect no matter how she looked at it. Even if there was a girl he liked, he probably wouldn't want to mention it again. Shui Yaoyao looked up and landed her gaze on that face. That person was still so handsome that even the starry sky outside seemed to lose its color. He was different from the Almighty. Although they grew up together, their personalities were different. This person always gave people a cold feeling. Even when he smiled, he looked like a playboy. But looking at his side profile, there was something else. Because he probably didn't notice her. He turned his head, his long fingers flicking the cigarette ash, his voice carrying a smile. "What's up?" The female streamer was direct. "I always wanted to find a chance to treat you to a meal. To thank young Master Jiang for helping me out last time." "No need." It was two simple words, but his voice floated towards her. Shui Yaoyao felt that it wasn't a good place for her to stand. The middle of the corridor was too obvious. Most importantly, in her current position, she could neither retreat nor advance. He probably noticed someone else's presence. The female streamer looked in her direction, her lips curved into a smile, her face as white as water. "It's an esports player from our company. He just won a match. He's amazing. Young Master Jiang, do you know him?" Shui Yaoyao didn't expect that she would become the topic of conversation. At this point, she could only walk over. Wearing her uniform, she was much braver than before. "Brother." Yes, when Shui Yaoyao called out that word, she didn't have any barriers anymore. But Shui Yaoyao wasn't sure if he was willing to acknowledge her as his sister. As expected, when she called out, his handsome face was expressionless. His handsome face was expressionless as he turned to look at her. His eyes were so deep that it made her heart palpitate. "Brother?" The female streamer's beautiful eyes widened, as if she had found out a secret. Even her expression became animated. "Yaoyao, are you young Master Jiang's sister?" Shui Yaoyao smiled, thinking that it was best not to answer. On the other hand, a bone-chilling voice came from the other side. "Not a blood relative." "Oh." The female streamer smiled. She had never heard of the Jiang family having a daughter. Shui Yaoyao was used to his denial. He didn't feel anything. She felt like she was unnecessary by just standing there. Coupled with the playful expression on the female host's face, Shui Yaoyao blushed. Luckily, there was no one around. He wanted to leave but couldn't find a suitable excuse or opportunity. It was a very delicate situation. Shui Yaoyao thought that if they continued talking, she would take the chance to slip away. If she wanted to get out, she had to go in that direction. If she went in this direction, she would be retreating. Chapter 1177. Right at this moment, a figure appeared in front of them. A silhouette appeared in front of her. Before his face could be seen, his voice was heard. "Yaoyao, how long do you want us to wait for you? Come quickly." It was Coco in his battle uniform. Probably because it was winter, He was afraid of the cold and had a scarf around his neck, making his face even more beautiful. Originally, Coco had only wanted to greet her, but after seeing so many people, he paused and walked over. He arched a brow, as though asking what's going on. Shui Yaoyao reacted quickly, as though she had found her savior. She held onto the cat-like youngster's arm. Did you wait too long? In fact, they interacted like this in the team, as close as siblings. Nonsense, I'm starving. If you don't believe me, listen to my stomach. When Coco pouted, he didn't look annoying, instead he looked cute. But I told them to wait for you. Everyone is outside now. Shui Yaoyao turned to Jiangzhua. Then we'll leave first. With that, she paused. Have fun. The last 5 words were directed at the female caster. She smiled elegantly, the beauty of a Jiangnan girl, full of immortality. Okay, bye. On the other hand, Jiangzhua was expressionless and cold, as though he hadn't heard her. Regardless, it was good that she left. This was Shui Yaoyao's first breath of relief after leaving. Coco frowned. Why do you look as though you were a third wheel? Are they dating? She'll lower your voice. Shui Yaoyao replied. I'm not sure. But there weren't many people who could make that person wait for them. Coco shook his head. The company signed a contract. New female casters aren't allowed to date for half a year. They aren't even allowed to date? Shui Yaoyao arched a brow. That's a little overbearing. Coco was smart now. Fox Feng set the contract. If he hears you, you don't have to eat. Yaoyao. Coco pressed the elevator button as he said. Moreover, these beauty bloggers are all signed by internet celebrities, while some are recruited by their managers from schools. There are all kinds of them, but the only thing they have in common is their good looks. After all, they aren't game streamers, and the fans like them because they are single. This kind of contract exists in every company that promotes internet celebrities, and it's based on market demand. Unless it's a very unique type of internet celebrity, like my goddess, every video she releases becomes a classic. These kinds of people who rely on their looks to get into a relationship, I haven't even dated one yet. The last sentence should be the main point. Shui Yaoyao could hear the perfect resentment in his voice. She smiled and said, You can find one. That won't do. If I find one, what about my wives who watch me play games? They'll cry. Coco said as if it was true. Hearing this, Shui Yaoyao's heart sank. So those people still can't accept that Her Highness Jiao is a girl because of this. Chapter 1178. Yes. The problem now was that Highness Jiao didn't seem to have any intention of returning. It was said that he had gone overseas to film a movie. But ever since the video was released, Shui Yaoyao didn't know why, but she had a feeling that she would never be able to see that figure in the esports arena again. Because it was obvious that when the video was released, there was a sense of farewell. Moreover, Highness Jiao couldn't be contacted at all. Shui Yaoyao's gaze followed the elevator lights. She didn't notice anything else. Jiangzhua, who was still standing in the long corridor, gripped his phone tightly. There wasn't a single reply to the message he sent. The female caster was still standing beside him, her smile still on her face. Young Master Jiang, do you want to walk around my workplace? He had helped her previously at the table, and seemed to be very interested in their club. This time, she had the chance to be alone. The female caster had to admit that she had long been moved. She knew that he liked her type, so naturally, she had to grab the opportunity. But she hadn't expected that he wouldn't give her any face at all. He only said one word, no. Then he walked toward the elevator. It wasn't a good time for her to strike up a conversation. There were other casters coming over. Rather than letting everyone notice him, it was better for her to take a step back. Some of them liked to snatch investors, so she had to guard against them. Shui Yaoyao's perception was actually wrong. Even if the other party was full of immortal air, he was still immortal. Everyone would think the same when they met someone they liked. There wasn't much difference. After Jiangzhua entered the elevator, the smile on his face disappeared completely. It was as though there was a heavy object pressing down on his chest. It was only when he walked out of the elevator that the heavy object on his chest seemed to be removed. But there was still no response from his phone. The message he sent was like a stone sinking into the ocean. Did that person not see it, Or did he want to be with someone else, so he didn't even reply? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Jiang was stood there, his phone still silent. He walked to the main entrance. After all, he had sent her a message to wait for him there. But obviously she wasn't there. There were many fans walking back and forth, and the surrounding people were all discussing the competition. I think it was a fluke. I don't think so. Think about it carefully. Shui Yaoyao's teleportation, her ability to predict CK's position, and the timing of the Tyrant King are all very accurate. This isn't something anyone can do. I have a feeling that Shui Yaoyao might have predicted CK's character this time. In this game, there are many supports, but there are only 2 that can counter them. Although Shui Yaoyao's support has been weakened this season, it can still counter the support. I don't understand what you're talking about, but it's good that you won. In the past, I always felt that she was just a decoration in Supreme Alliance. 23333. You should have heard Almighty Z's call. Everyone has their own role in the team. Don't underestimate even the smallest support. I realized why you're always insulting me today. Because I play support too. To be honest, I'm a fan of Shui Yaoyao. She has finally found her place in Supreme Alliance. Don't you think that after seeing her, you want to work harder? Chapter 1179. When he heard the 2 passers-by discussing the last sentence. For no reason, Jiang Zhuo wasn't in a good mood. It was probably because the temperature outside was getting colder. It didn't feel like summer anymore. Even the air was filled with haze. Jiang Zhuo didn't wear much when he came, hence he felt the chill. As he listened to their discussion, his eyes deepened. Then his phone rang. Jiang Zhuo finally moved, but when he saw the WeChat profile picture, his breath turned colder. Young Master Jiang, are you cold standing outside? Do you need me to send you some clothes? We have some clothes in the live stream room, some for boys. Jiang Zhuo didn't take a second look and closed the WeChat message. The female caster was disappointed because she was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window on the 3rd floor and could see what was happening below. But she didn't give up. After all, she had been able to add this person's WeChat because of her work. The temperature outside was getting colder. In fact, it hadn't been long since Jiang Zhuo sent the message. But this time, Jiang Zhuo lost all his patience. With a cold expression, he stuffed his phone into his pocket and walked in the direction of the car. The driver was surprised to see his young master return alone. After all, he was here to meet Missy and bring her home. Why was he alone? But as a driver who had been with the Jiang family for many years, he knew what he should and shouldn't ask. It was still noisy outside. Even if it was a small-scale solo competition, there would be a group of people watching. Most of them were young. After all, Hero was much younger than Final Fantasy and standalone CS. It was normal for there to be some noise. Jiang Zhuo turned a deaf ear to all of this, including the names of the 2 people. He leaned against the back of the seat and tugged at his collar, allowing Uncle Wang to drive. At this location and time, there would definitely be a jam. The car couldn't move, and could only wait for someone to pass first. Under such circumstances, Jiang Zhuo rolled down the window. He wanted to take a breather, but he inadvertently glanced at the 2 people in uniform not far away. In an instant, he didn't know what was going on. His heart suddenly ached. It wasn't that she didn't have time to reply to his message, but she probably didn't want to. After all, she had never acted like this in front of her. She turned her face sideways and put the earphones in the boy's ears. The 2 of them listened to one phone and stood there casually, giving people a sense of intimacy. He could even see her lowering her head and smiling. Her face was still red as she reached out and tucked her stray hair behind her ear. Jiang Zhuo subconsciously clenched his fists. At the crossroads, the traffic lights changed. There were people coming and going, and the car could not leave. Shui Yaoyao saw Jiang Zhuo sitting in the car. He seemed to be incompatible with her, and even his bones were permeated with a noble aura. He sat in the back seat with his usual casual posture, just like when he appeared in front of her again, after he learned that her mother would marry into the Jiang family. He also sat like this, giving off a feeling of superiority. However, he had the capital to be high and mighty. The driver was still Uncle Wang. Uncle Wang also noticed her. Shui Yaoyao was walking away. Chapter 1180. He looked as though he didn't like seeing her at such a time. Shui Yaoyao guessed that he was probably unhappy that she had interrupted his date and mentioned that she was his sister. After all, he had never been willing to admit it. Shui Yaoyao didn't make things difficult for Uncle Wang, nodding towards him as a greeting. Her retreating made Jiang Zhua even more frustrated. Fortunately, he could still control himself. Even if he really wanted to ask her how he, Jiang Zhua, was lacking compared to a boy. Did she know how cold it was outside and how long he had waited for her? As the car moved, the questions disappeared. Coco noticed Yaoyao's gaze following the car and glanced over, his gaze clean. What are you looking at? Young Master Zhang's car. I wanted to greet him. Shui Yaoyao turned over. We seem to have interrupted his date just now. He doesn't look too good. He must be unhappy. Coco scoffed, the arrogance of a cat. Then let him be unhappy. Did he forget that you are his sister? Shui Yaoyao waved her hands. It doesn't count if I'm not his biological sister. Even if I'm not his biological sister, I should give in. Coco pulled his rabbit over. You are our sister, Yao. Shui Yaoyao glanced at him, replying slowly. I remember I'm a month older than you, young man. F***CK. Why do you have to be so clear? This song is really nice. I'll use it for the background music in the next live stream. Coco cleverly changed the topic. Shui Yaoyao didn't continue, turning to ask. Didn't you say you were waiting for me? Where are the others? Fox Feng is probably held up. Uncle Yin and the rest are in the car. The only ones who aren't in are Lin Feng and Yin Yin. Uncle told us to wait for them here. Coco paused and said meaningfully. I have a feeling that the two of them want to talk about something alone. Otherwise, why aren't they out yet? Shui Yaoyao choked, but even she could sense that the relationship between Almighty Lin and Almighty Yun was different from before. Was it true that they were a couple? She could only ask this question with her eyes. Coco bit the rabbit ear in his arms and muttered. How scary. I'm the only straight guy left in the team. This will cause misunderstandings. Shui Yaoyao. To be honest, you're the one who looks the most like a gay in the team. However, it did take quite a long time. Shui Yaoyao took out her phone to check the time. Unexpectedly, when she turned on the screen, she saw 2 WeChat messages in silent mode. They were all sent to her by young Master Jiang. The first was position. The second message was 3 words. Come here. The message was sent 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. At that time, she seemed to have just gotten off the elevator. Shui Yaoyao looked up at the main entrance on the west side. She thought about the car that had just driven past her. No wonder he looked a little angry. It was probably because she didn't go to the designated place according to his instructions, and made him wait for a few minutes on the 10th. She knew Jiang Zhua. Except for the person he wanted to wait for, he was willing to pay the time. If he didn't want to wait, he probably felt that it wasn't worth it. She had probably wasted his time just now. But Shui Yaoyao couldn't figure out why he was looking for her. Was it because he called her brother, just now? It was highly possible. Shui Yaoyao looked at the WeChat page. She wanted to reply, but since he had already left and she was angry, there was no point in replying. Chapter 1181. The car was silent. The chauffeur could sense that his young master wasn't in a good mood. He had intended to return to the Jiang family, but his young master had changed his mind and wanted to return to his own place. After Jiang Zhua returned to his room, he didn't turn on the lights. Instead, he walked to the sofa in the living room and sat down, the back of his head resting on the sofa as he stared at the ceiling. He had never done such a thing before. However, he didn't know why today was different from usual. The surroundings were too quiet. It was so quiet that he didn't know what he was doing. Even his eyes were a little empty. When he closed his eyes and opened them again, he seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly stood up and kicked the trash can to vent his anger. After a loud bang, everything returned to silence. He sat there, his brows furrowed. The esports ticket that had been placed beside his hand was such an eyesore. It was so eyesore that every time he saw it, he would think of certain scenes. It was really uncomfortable. He crumpled the ticket with his fingers. This series of actions caused a loud noise. It was clear that Jiangzhou was really unhappy. Ever since he had started the company, he rarely lost his temper like this. But when he was in school, he had been stubborn. Whenever he had a problem with his father, he would kick things to vent his anger. At that time, she was the only one who knew how he had vented his anger. Now, Jiangzhou lifted his head to look at the ceiling, his eyes even more empty than before. No one knew what he was thinking. He was completely silent, the silence as though he wasn't in the room. The crowd outside the entertainment department was almost gone. Coco and Shui Yaoyao were in their uniforms, leaning against the wall as they waited. I'll send them a message. In the end, Coco couldn't take it anymore, his fingers typing on his phone. At this moment, Yunhu was held up by the media, mainly because his return was a hot topic. The platform would definitely interview as many people as they could. Lin Feng sat in the lounge waiting. He felt that it was taking too long, so he opened a game on his phone. Because there was only a glass door, the soundproofing wasn't very good. He could still vaguely hear the interview question. Why did you decide to come back? I heard that once Almighty Yun missed his school abroad, it would be hard to get in again. They've reserved a spot for 3 months. If I don't come back to be with my Supreme Alliance teammates, I'll probably have regrets for the rest of my life. Yunhu paused. Compared to my studies, there's someone more important to me here. Damn. This was Lin Feng's first reaction. After all, every time Yunhu said that, the reporters would definitely link them together. As expected, the interviewer's voice rose. Could the most important person be our Lord Lin Feng? Lin Feng reached out and rubbed his ears. There was really no creativity in the interview at all. Yunhu was very cooperative. Immersing, he replied. Everyone in the team is important. Almighty Yun is being bureaucratic again. Alright, I won't waste any more of Almighty Yun's time. Master Lin Feng should have been waiting there for a long time. When Lin Feng heard this, he thought to himself, you finally found a topic to write a couple about, right? Indeed, the topic of the CP would definitely be read more than the news of Almighty Yun returning to China alone. The interview was over. Chapter 1182. His broad shoulders made the simple black uniform look straight and stylish. It was no wonder so many people wanted to interview him. Lin Feng stuffed his phone into his pocket and was about to stand up. The person who was walking over suddenly bent down and landed in front of him. He placed his left hand on the chair he was sitting on and said slowly, "Why are you in a hurry?" In an instant, Lin Feng seemed to be enveloped by him. The man's beautiful chin appeared in front of him, accentuating the black uniform. He felt that the distance was a little too close. He adjusted himself instinctively and wanted to stand up. Nonsense, of course I'm in a hurry. Coco and the rest have been waiting outside for a long time. They even sent me a message. Let's go, let's go. With that, Lin Feng took a step forward. Wait a minute. Yunhu spoke again, his tone calm. Ever since I came back, you didn't seem to express anything. Express anything? Bring him out for a meal or a night at the internet cafe. This was just the beginning. Lin Feng was still standing there thinking. Yunhu had already stretched his hand out. Lin Feng didn't know what he wanted to do, or if he was crazy. He leaned forward and fiddled with Yunhu's arm. In that instant, the aura from his body intensified. Lin Feng said, F***CK. What exactly do you want to do? There was a hint of laughter in his tone. Basically, when guys got along, they would have a catchphrase. Why? I'm scared. Yunhu was still adjusting. His beautiful brows arched slightly as he moved both of Lin Feng's arms into a perfect arc. Lin Feng smirked. I'm scared. Let me tell you, I have fans too. That's right, you have many fans, Almighty Lin Feng. When Yunhu said this, his tone was calm and obviously playful. A word rolled out of Lin Feng's throat. He chuckled and scolded, Scram. After a trip abroad, did he not even know how to speak properly? And what was he trying to do? Lin Feng lowered his lids and looked at his posture. He didn't know that his breath was already on Yunhu's neck. He still felt uncomfortable and wanted to move. This was a little too close. But he pressed down on his wrist. Then Yunhu bent down and crawled in from the bottom up. His entire body appeared in the arc formed by his arms. Lin Feng's head was still lowered, and the other party's actions caught him off guard. Even his thin lips touched the other party's ear. The cool sensation was soft, and scary. Holy sh*t, what kind of position is this? Also, did he kiss Yinhu's ear just now? Lin Feng's eyes widened. His first reaction was to turn his face away. Otherwise, who knew where his lips would touch? Really, your sister? Lin Feng's heart clearly couldn't calm down. His lips still lingered on that unusual feeling. Although it was cold, her lips felt a little hot. She didn't know why. Lin Feng clenched his fists tightly. Even his fingertips felt intense. F***ck me. Calm down, it's just a touch, a light brush, it shouldn't be a big deal. Lin Feng coughed lightly. Chapter 1183. In an instant, Lin Feng's face turned red. F***ck. Did your language teacher teach you? Do you know how to use adjectives? I just touched you, that's a touch, bro. Lin Feng had never felt so awkward before. Oh. Yinhu replied nonchalantly. Then he laughed. His laughter seemed to travel from his ears to his heart. The two of them were really too close. This kind of posture. Lin Feng wanted to explode again. He inhaled deeply. Also, what are you doing? It would be weird if I didn't touch your ear while hugging you. That's right. Yinhu had made a circle with his hands before going in. They were so close that Lin Feng was hugging him. Because they were so close, Lin Feng could even feel the rise and fall of his chest when his heart beat. He wanted to let go, his scalp tingling. It was all because the man's hormones were too strong. Yinhu wouldn't give him the chance. He hugged him like a good brother. Then he lowered his head and whispered into his ear. Why? Didn't you cry when I went overseas? Now that I'm back, I'm hugging you to comfort you. Lin Feng couldn't find fault with Yinhu. After all, the hug didn't have any meaning. Lin Feng pushed him away. Comfort my **s, I don't need it. If you mention the airport again, I'll blacklist you. Did you hear me? Didn't I say that I have fans too? I'll get my army of fans to destroy you. You're amazing. Yinhu was still laughing after being pushed away. It was a natural interaction. But as for why Yinhu took the opportunity to do something, only he knew. After leaving the country, Yinhu's thoughts changed. In the past, he was afraid to express his thoughts because he would hate him so much that he wouldn't even want to meet him. Now Yinhu only had one thought. To turn him gay. So what if he was straight? He didn't think about it, but it didn't mean that others didn't. Yinhu gradually understood that it was one thing to convince him in his heart, but it was another thing to watch him walk closer to someone else and be unable to control himself. Since Supreme Alliance could be reformed, nothing was impossible between the two of them. Even if it was impossible, he would make everything possible. Lin Feng didn't know what Yinhu was thinking about. He just felt an indescribable heat from the small space they were in. Damn it, was today's weather forecast a lie? Didn't he tell them that the weather would turn cold after autumn? He even reminded them to wear more clothes? Why is it so hot? Lin Feng turned his head away. After putting some distance between them, he felt much better. Go down. Yinhu's voice came from behind him. Lin Feng replied with an N. Both of them were wearing black uniforms with silver logos. No matter how one looked at them, they looked cool and dashing. There were still fans waiting outside. Indeed, the reason there were so many fans at the venue was because Yinhu was back. They wanted to take a look, which was why they hadn't left yet. Lin Feng hadn't expected there to be so many people there, and they were all Yinhu's fans. He arched a brow. When the fans saw that the two of them came out together, they cheered even more. Chapter 1184. This girl was special. Perhaps others treated Yinhu like a fan towards their idol. But this girl was different. During Yinhu's livestream, she had smashed many planes. That wasn't all. She had given other fans mini red packets, just to be the representative to send flowers. The atmosphere was just right. Sometimes the hearts of fans were really strange. They felt that no one was worthy of their idol, but when they received something substantial, they would gradually change and lean towards the person who gave them benefits. After all, Idols were untouchable and the girl was by their side. Most importantly, she was beautiful and rich. Hence, no matter what she did, they wouldn't think it was too much. They even felt that her way of chasing someone was a little flirtatious. Some fans only hoped that Almighty Yin would accept this bouquet of flowers. Even the naive Lin Feng felt that the atmosphere wasn't like the usual atmosphere of a fan meeting. Moreover, Yin Hu could see through the entire situation with one glance. The girl was also in the online circle, but she wasn't an esports player. Perhaps she really liked him, but he had rejected her a long time ago. But there were some people who wouldn't take the rejection seriously. Instead, they would lie and say that they were close. The more ambiguous and fake her words, the more Yin Hu felt conflicted. During that period of time, he had been busy overseas and hadn't asked Orange Horse to ban her since it wasn't a big deal. Now, it seemed like he had underestimated some people's thoughts. Yin Hu arched a brow, glancing at the bouquet near him. He stuffed a hand into his pocket and laughed. Don't you know that people with boyfriends can't accept flowers from others? People with boyfriends? In that instant, all the fans froze. There were still the reporters who hadn't left. Lin Feng's first reaction was F***ck. Did Yin Hu go crazy when he was in love? What was the tolerance in China? What was he trying to do? It wouldn't be good for his boyfriend if he made it public. Lin Feng could almost imagine the explosion on the official website that night. Fox Feng wouldn't be able to sleep well. Supreme Alliance had been going against the trend recently. They should get someone to take a look at their feng shui. But that was how the esports industry was. Love could sometimes turn into harm. Lin Feng had many thoughts, one after another surfacing in his mind. But the next second, there was a bouquet in his arms. What was going on? Lin Feng was a little stunned. He wanted to curse, but then he felt that there were too many people. Holding the flowers with one hand, he felt that he was a little stupid. Damn you, why did you give me my flower? Did he look like a follower? Yin Hu replied slowly. Isn't it natural for a fan to send flowers to her boyfriend? What the F***ck? What the F***ck? Lin Feng was also hit. His face was hot. Who's your boyfriend? Yin Hu arched a brow. The online group counts. Why? I've only left the country once and you don't want me as your CP anymore. Haven't you heard of King of Storms Road? You. At this time, Lin Feng also understood that the other party was joking. Using this method to avoid direct confrontation with the fans was not a bad idea. But F***ck, why was his heart beating so fast just now? Chapter 1185. It's nothing. It's indeed King Feng Yun. I'll accept the flowers from the one below, Lin Feng said, reaching out and placing his arm over Yin Hu's shoulder. Both of them broke into smiles, unbridled, allowing the reporters to take photos. The more they acted like this, the less people would think there was anything going on between them. Being a couple wasn't a big deal in the esports industry. It was often used as a joke. Only the girl felt a little uncomfortable in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She looked at the two of them and lowered her head to send a message to a few other fans she was close with. They can't really be together, right? Impossible, it's a joke. Even if they are together, it doesn't matter. I'm a fan of this couple. The girl raised her hand. It's nothing, I just feel a little disappointed. That's true, Almighty Yin actually gave your flowers to someone else after receiving them. I feel like the two of you are too detached. Almighty Yin hasn't shown any response from the beginning. To be honest, I feel a little awkward watching you send flowers. How can you say that? Isn't it because we like him? That's right. After listening to their conversation, the fourth girl didn't speak. Actually, she was a little confused. Back then, when she joined the chat group, it was because she wanted Almighty Yin to be better. Why did things change in the end? Unknowingly, someone had changed. She had been standing close to Almighty Yin and judging from his expression, he didn't like the flowers, which was why she realized she had gone overboard. She had been clamoring for Almighty Yin to accept her as a friend since they were all fans and would join in the commotion. But thinking about it, what was the difference between this and forcing someone to marry Almighty Yin? If Almighty Yin wanted to date, he could do it himself. They were causing a commotion in a public place. Fortunately, Almighty Lin was there. It was a good way to divert attention. If not, Almighty Yun accepting the flowers would be on the news the next day. Now they were at the crucial moment of the Asian Cup. They were still thinking about private matters. Was this really okay? Who was the one who said from the start that if one liked an idol, one had to be closer to his work and stay away from his private life? Why did they forget why they liked him in the first place? Now, she actually wanted him to live according to her own imagination. That person thought about it for a moment, and finally decided to leave the group. It wasn't because of anything else, but because she didn't want to become a person that even she didn't recognize in the end. On the other side, Lin Feng's hand was placed on Yin Hu's shoulder. He was very adept at dealing with the media. However, the warmth on his face couldn't be deceived. Yin Hu created trouble for him the moment he came back. That was enough. Only when they entered the elevator did Lin Feng retract his hand. He coughed and looked at the flower in his left hand. He wanted to return it to its owner. Unexpectedly, Yin Hu didn't accept it. Why would a man like me need flowers? Besides, didn't I give it to you just now, boyfriend? Yin Hu said the last 3 words very slowly, almost with pauses between each word. Lin Feng wanted to curse again, but in the end he could only spit out. F***ck, are you addicted to playing? Yin Hu watched as the elevator slid down to the first floor. He walked out first and glanced at the flower in Lin Feng's arms. It suits you. Lin Feng wanted to say that it didn't suit him. It wasn't a big deal for a man like him to hold a flower, but it was a big deal for a man like him to hold it. However, he couldn't throw the flower away. If he did, who knew what the media would write? He carried it on his shoulder, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. He was very mischievous. Honestly, if it wasn't for Lin Feng's beautiful face and straightforward behavior, he would have been a pure man who grew up in the alleys of Jiang City. The 2 of them were dressed in their uniforms, and one of them was carrying a bouquet of flowers. It was definitely eye-catching. Shui Yaoyao raised her head and saw the 2 young masters. She seemed to reach out and wave at them. Then she shifted her gaze to the bouquet Lin Feng was carrying, her eyes full of interest. Coco was listening to the song and was shocked by this scene. He asked instinctively, "You guys are progressing so fast? What did they mean by progressing?" Lin Feng blushed. F***ck, stop making wild guesses. This is a gift from a fan. Oh, Coco bit the rabbit's ear in his arms. I've never received flowers from a fan before. Almighty Lin Feng, can you explain why Almighty Yin is written on the bouquet? Lin Feng thought, hey, aren't you excited? He pulled Coco over and started playing with him. Shui Yaoyao thought he was shy. Yin Hu's gaze was gentle. He turned over. Where's Boss Feng? He's probably still busy. Fox Feng asked us to bring you to the car first. We've already booked a place for dinner. You can go all out today. Coco's face was still red when he said this. He was obviously happy. On this day, there was no one who was unhappy. But even so, Fengyi was still thinking of ways to contact her. However, the location of the call couldn't be found. Actually, it wasn't because Bojio didn't want to pick up the call. Instead, they were discovered the moment they finished their call. Prince was the first to react because the aura of the person standing with his back facing the light was too strong. He howled. He had wanted his brother to escape since they weren't there, and it wasn't easy to punish them. Unexpectedly, before he could move, a gaze swept over him. Other than coldness, he couldn't feel any other aura. In that instant, Prince froze in midair. His limbs were stiff, much less his scalp. Right now, he only had one thought. They didn't seem like cousins. The person in his military uniform walked past him. He didn't seem like someone from the military. Instead, he seemed like someone from a higher class. When the aura assaulted him, Prince froze even more. Fortunately, the person didn't stop. He probably knew his true target was in the forest. Prince heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, he heard the man spit out 2 words faintly, "Come here." Bojio moved her sleeves and hid her phone in the sleeves of her uniform. She stuffed a hand into her pocket and walked towards Qin Mo. Prince was still in a daze. Where's the phone he was holding? Magician stood beside him. He wanted to say something but didn't. After all, he was impressed by this brother's courage. He actually dared to be alone with the person his captain liked. He even came to the forest for a secret rendezvous. To be honest, this was a suicidal move. You're awesome, brother. Chapter 1186. Very quickly, his premonition was proven true. The person behind him spoke with a unique indifference and nobility. Hand him over to the old general, and let him handle it. Yes. Magician started to lead him away. Prince's eyes widened. F***ck, why did everyone know about his sudden appearance? Stop joking, he had already informed his uncle. Even his uncle wasn't sure which team he was in. What exactly was going on? Magician could tell what Prince was thinking from his expression. Brother, you're still too inexperienced. You're still young and inexperienced. Without the two of them, Chinemo glanced down at the person in front of him. Chinemo lowered his lids and looked at the person in front of him. He arched a brow and after a moment he said, "Hand over the thing in your hand." Bojio wanted to make up for it. "What is it?" Chinemo reached out and grabbed her wrist, which was in her pocket. Then he pulled up her sleeves and pushed them up. Under his palms was her smooth skin. It was very warm, which made his gaze deepen. Bojio's face heated up. She wasn't sure if it was because of the coldness from his hand, or because of her guilt. Since she knew she wasn't going to run away with the phone, she decided to be honest. "I didn't do anything to harm the team, and I didn't contact Grandfather Butler. Regardless of who you contacted, you aren't allowed to bring any communication devices here." Chinemo took the phone out from her sleeves. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You guys are really capable." It wasn't a compliment. Bojio felt that she had to push the blame away. Since Prince had the old general's protection, he shouldn't be afraid. It's mainly because of Prince's connections. That was the truth. "Oh," Chinemo replied slowly. "Your friend will definitely cry if he hears that." Bojio replied honestly, during a team battle, buying teammates is an appropriate way to ensure one's survival. It's also a strategy. "What do you think are the chances of you surviving if you fall into my hands?" Chinemo asked coldly. Bojio coughed. "I won't do it a second time." Chinemo didn't reply. Bojio was about to move. Just then Chinemo spoke again. "Come over. It's so close. And you still want to go over?" Bojio glanced up at the person in front of her and scanned the surroundings. When she realized that no one else knew, she roughly understood the Almighty's intentions. The Almighty definitely wanted her to coax him. Definitely. She knew very well what kind of thoughts those proud little princesses in the novels usually had. Bojio smiled. She opened her arms and hugged his waist. Even though her face was dark, there was an indescribable youthful energy around her. Chinemo paused. Then he reached out and hugged her. He was probably satisfied. His brows relaxed. The more she looked at him, the cuter he was. Bojio wanted to stretch her claws and take advantage of him since it was a rare opportunity. Who would have thought that before she could even move her hand, that familiar breath landed behind her ear? Unhurriedly he said, 10 laps with weights. Bojio. Wasn't he acting coquettishly just now? What dream are you having again? Chinemo pinched the youngster's face. He didn't use much strength. It was more like he was spoiling her, but his words had shattered her fantasy. Chapter 1187. Bojio was confused. It would be great if the Almighty could just be his pretty boy quietly. Why did he have to speak? It wasn't beautiful at all. The moment she thought about it, her face was lifted up by him. He asked casually, "Do you want to kiss?" Image. Kiss. No. Even though that face looked very noble and abstinent when she looked at it up close, she resisted the charm and turned her face away a little. But she couldn't avoid it. He looked at her for a long time. Then his lips suddenly curled up. He lowered his head, and his deep gaze landed on her lips. Then he moved closer. His intention was clear. Bojio's face heated up from his breath. She stayed in that position and placed her lips on the corner of his mouth. It felt soft. He didn't move. He seemed to be allowing her to kiss him, a faint smile on his face. It was obvious that he wanted her to do whatever she wanted. Bojio arched a brow. Just as she was about to move, her waist was lifted. His lips kissed her lightly. It was so lingering that it made her heart tremble. When the numbness spread, her legs turned soft. Fortunately, he was holding on to her waist. The kiss wasn't fierce. It was gentle, as though he was tasting something. Bojio's breathing was a mess. After all, the hand that went into her waist couldn't be ignored. When he saw her breathing on his shoulder, he let go and pulled a distance away from her. Bojio thought that was it, and was about to open her mouth. The next second he pushed her against the tree. He tilted his head slightly and kissed her. This time, it was so domineering that she couldn't resist. Bojio felt as though her entire body was on fire. When her skin touched his fingers, the slight chill and numbness made her heart beat wildly. When it surged up from her tailbone, she couldn't bear the heavy burden. She felt the breath on her lips. It was so hot and tempting. Hence, her thoughts were burned away. Her body trembled in his arms. Her heart felt as though there was a cat scratching its claws. It was so ticklish that she could only reach out and grab his arm. He seemed to have sensed her reaction. He gradually stopped. When her breathing stabilized, he leaned over again. He looked at the person in front of him. His thin lips were slightly red. His eyes seemed to be watery. He almost couldn't control himself. Idiot. Bojio was still puzzled. How was she stupid? The Almighty always scolded her for no reason. Whenever he was arrogant, he would be like that. Why are you so good-looking? Just looking at you makes me want to kiss you. His fingers touched her face again. Their breaths were still together. After being kissed again, Bojio felt that the Almighty she had managed to woo was exceptionally sweet. He even knew how to praise her. He stretched out his arms and hugged her with a devilish look on his face. Chin Mo didn't reject her. He unbuttoned his military jacket and pulled her into his arms. His well-defined chin rested on the youngster's head. He had probably given all his patience and gentleness to one person. Even his back view seemed different from usual. It was very quiet because they were in the forest. Bojio could hear the beating of his heart. His heartbeat was as urgent as hers. Gradually, her strength lessened. Neither of them spoke. That was the feeling after falling in love. It was as if the air was filled with the sweetness of lemon. Chapter 1188. But this wasn't the right place to date. In the military, there were many things Chin Mo had to worry about. Their embrace was interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming from afar. Chin Mo dragged her directly to the training ground for weighted running. Her heartbeat hadn't calmed down yet. All sorts of emotions were running through her. She and the Almighty were really in love now, right? That should be it. They were dating without any grudges. Bojio carried her things and ran forward as though she was sleepwalking. This time, she didn't seem to have done anything for the Almighty to accept her. It was a pity she hadn't even used her tricks. But she would probably be able to take advantage of him in the future. Now she had to confirm their relationship. Once the overseas mission was over and she dealt with those people, she would find a chance to propose to the Almighty. Bojio's thoughts were always farsighted. She was different from others when she ran with weights. Her steps were steady and she was familiar with conserving her energy. Hence, from afar, she was still a handsome youngster. But for some reason, her eyes kept glancing to the side. Her gaze swept past his perfect chin and landed on his thin lips, a layer of light. This was the kind of person who had kissed her just a moment ago. Bojio blushed, her heart racing. She wanted to kiss him back, but she didn't have the chance. Prince was basically done with his scolding. After he was brought back, he received the same punishment. The military intercepted their messages and knew they didn't send any special messages. But such a mistake still had to be punished. In the military, punishment wouldn't be spared just because of their status. As a depressed prince, he couldn't understand why the fellow who was running with weights was so happy after being punished. Since when did this person become so enlightened? Standing not far away, Chin Mo, who was dressed in his military uniform, seemed to be laughing silently. Magician, who was walking over, was startled by the laughter and stopped in his tracks. What was going on? In reality, Chin Mo was restraining himself since he couldn't be too obvious. Perhaps he didn't realize that the corners of his lips had never moved down. Magician felt his scalp go numb. He gulped and asked, "Boss, are you in a good mood?" The devil had never smiled in such a way before. It was a piercing sight. He thought that the boss would just glance at him. Who would have thought that the answer he got would be a smiling N? Magician couldn't stand it anymore. Because of number 10 who was punished to run? Chinemo glanced over, the smile still in his eyes. "Why are you so concerned about my private life?" Magician immediately stood up, his heel touching the ground. "No, I don't care. Whoever dared to care would die." Chinemo retracted his gaze and looked at the figure that was still running. He smiled again, like the moon in the night, as though he wasn't a subordinate in front of him. There was really no end to it. Magician stood at the side, feeling that his boss was showing off. That smile really made him want to curse. "Boss, we are still a group of single dogs. Please don't be like this." It wasn't easy for him to stop laughing. It was the old general who had something to discuss with boss. Before he left, the boss tossed him a bunch of keys. After a certain someone finishes her run, ask her to take a shower in my room. Chapter 1189. Prince was still oblivious to what had happened. When he saw the soldier leading him, he stood there motionless as though he had been petrified. His expression was hard to describe. Prince was wondering if he should continue running since it was lonely without anyone watching him. Magician couldn't care less about this crown prince. His boss had actually asked number 10 to go to his room to take a bath. It was like a bolt from the blue. Magician felt that he needed some peace and quiet. It was obvious that his boss didn't intend to hide it from them, but it was only limited to their operation team. As for the others in the military, it was better not to know about their relationship. Magician's heart was tormented, especially when the youngster ran over with a thin layer of sweat. "Where's Captain?" Magician felt as though he had eaten too much, but he continued to hold on to the key, acting natural. "Number 10. Here." Bojio straightened. Even though her voice was lazy, she still followed the rules of the military. Magician turned. "Follow me." They would talk when there was only the two of them. Bojio arched a brow, following him. Prince was still running. He wanted to finish his run as soon as possible, so that he could listen in. Everyone had a gossipy heart. Magician walked in front. He coughed lightly and lowered his voice. "Boss wants you to take a shower in his room." "All right." Bojio had a white towel around her neck. She laughed when she heard his words. Magician. What a torture. He was still the one passing the message. This reminded him of the times when he had been in junior high. The people sitting in front and behind him would always ask him to pass small notes. Honestly, didn't those in love consider the dignity of single dogs like him? It was obvious that Bojio couldn't be bothered with his feelings at this moment. Getting the Almighty was the happiest thing. When Magician turned back, the person behind him was still laughing. Really, he shouldn't have accepted this job. Magician paused. Don't be so obvious in the military. They were about to go on a mission and many people were watching their captain. Bojio smiled. Don't worry, I won't. There must be people asking about your relationship with Captain, right? Magician felt that as someone with experience, he had to comfort her. Bojio caressed her chin. Indeed. Then how did you answer? Magician thought to himself, this person should know his limits. Bojio lifted her lips, looking devilish. Family. 2 words. Magician was once again pinned to the ground. He shouldn't have asked such a question. He was practically asking for a dog to eat. Didn't he say that he had a sense of propriety? Bojio glanced at Magician's pale face and reached out to pat his shoulder. There are many types of family members. It might not be the type you are thinking of. But do you want to hear how I managed to woo the Almighty? Magician refused to listen further, putting on a dignified look. I'll give you the key. You can go yourself. With that, he ran off in tears. It was too cruel. Bojio looked at the key in her hand. She turned it around twice, still not satisfied. She finally knew what it meant to like someone. Liking someone was when you wanted the whole world to know that you were together with him. Chapter 1190. Her hands were itching. In the past, if she had a phone, she would have posted an announcement on her official Weibo account. But now, without electronic products, she wasn't able to express her joy. The time on her wrist was still moving. Bojo glanced at it. There was still some time before the jungle PK. She walked around the side and towards the Lamborghini. At this moment, there wasn't anyone near the car. Actually, other than Bojo, there weren't many people who dared to appear nearby. Bojo used her voice to unlock the car lazily. She reached out to open the car door and sat inside. The intelligence system sent a wave of excitement. But the system still had a memory. After the previous 2 replies, little Blackie didn't expect its owner to drive it away. I chased him. Bojo tapped her fingers on the steering wheel and laughed arrogantly. Isn't Daddy amazing? For the first time, little Blackie didn't want to speak. What exactly was Master here for? The Almighty even praised me. You should know that it isn't easy for someone like the Almighty to praise someone. Bojo continued. Do you think I should express something? I can't get high in the military. Why don't I ask Grandfather Butler to propose marriage to the In family? They are overseas as well. It would be more convenient. Little Blackie. Why did you want to go ahead the moment you chased him? It had never seen such a master before. The rearview mirror reflected the youngster's image. Little Blackie didn't know what her master was thinking about. Suddenly, she broke into a smile and pressed her face against the steering wheel. She tossed and turned before spitting out. The feeling of being in love isn't bad. It's a pity you're a robot. You probably won't be able to experience it for the rest of your life. As a car, little Blackie couldn't take it anymore. Master, did you specially come here to show off your love? MMH. The youngster held her chin and smiled. The Almighty's kissing skills aren't bad either. I should marry him as soon as possible. Little Blackie. It didn't want to listen. It didn't want to listen. It wanted to activate the automatic blocking program. Wait a minute, F***CK. Did Master press a button just now? It couldn't turn off automatically? Was she planning to let it listen from the start? Master, where was your humanity? It wasn't easy for Bojo to find someone who listened to her. Of course, she wouldn't let it go. Even if it was a car and not a person, she was going to share it with him. Her reaction was indeed rare. The heat on her face had not subsided since the beginning, and the sound of her heartbeat did not decrease even after they parted. They had just met, but she wanted to hear that person's voice again. That person had many identities. He was an esports god loved by countless people, a young major general with excellent marksmanship, and an expert criminal psychologist. After these identities faded away, he had only one identity, her boyfriend. Her boyfriend. Just the thought of it filled Bojo with sweetness. Even her smile was clearer than usual. She lazily leaned against the seat, her arms casually crossed. Dressed in a black combat uniform, she still looked very handsome. She had the vitality of a young man, but she couldn't help but feel happy. Chinemo couldn't hold it in either. Chapter 1191. Chinmo's smile didn't matter. The old general, who was sitting opposite him, almost got scalded by the tea in his mouth. Even his heart trembled. He turned and exchanged glances with the adjutant beside him. He was obviously asking what was wrong with him. The adjutant shook his head slightly, still in a daze. He was similarly shocked. In the past, the almighty devil would smile, but every time he did, it was vague. That kind of smile was definitely not a good thing. It was when he wanted to kick someone out of the army, throw some trouble for the chief to deal with, or anger the regiment commander who was stationed opposite him. In short, it was not a smile in the real sense of the word. Now, the adjutant felt as though his eyes were about to be blinded. The main thing was that the almighty devil didn't stop smiling. He didn't know what he was thinking. Cough. The old general finally couldn't take it anymore. He placed his fist by his lips and pretended to ask casually, "Are you in a good mood today?" "Am I?" When Chinemo asked, the smile on his face disappeared. The old general didn't want to say anything else. "How dare you ask me? I'm already smiling so much. What do you think?" But such straightforward words could only be mocked in his heart. Did something good happen? The old general knew that he had to understand Qin Mo's thoughts before he went out for a mission. Qin Mo took a sip of tea and replied casually, "Same as usual." Damn it. Who would believe such a lie if it was told? The old general had a bad temper, but he couldn't do anything in front of Qin Mo. He treasured talents too much. I asked my nephew just now. He isn't sensible. He didn't make any big mistakes, but the unit allows such small mistakes. Everything is done according to the rules, and he will be punished accordingly. After hearing the bureau chief's words, Qin Mo suddenly said, "A little." What? The old general thought he was using the opportunity to kick his nephew away. Honestly, it wasn't a big deal if he really kicked him away. The mission was too dangerous. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Don't let him go to any small forest in the future. It will cause misunderstandings. The old general was confused. He didn't understand why he said that, but it was a small matter. I'll get the adjutant to talk to him later. What do you think of his condition? This was what the old general wanted to ask. Qin Mo placed his teacup down. Very suitable. 3 words, no more, no less. The old commander had mixed feelings for a moment. Soldiers that Qin Mo took a liking to were always good soldiers. However, it also meant that he had to carry out that overseas mission. Qin Mo could sense the old general's thoughts. His gaze wasn't as bright as before. Instead, it was as dark as the night, giving off a sense of relief. Don't worry, once I bring my soldiers out, I will bring them all back. Actually, I already had a premonition. The old general laughed and sighed. To be honest, I'm quite proud that our Yi family has such a soldier. Don't think that he's just a hooligan. He really likes to stay in the army. I've seen his information. You guys have a pattern in selecting people. When he finished close combat and came out of the army, a psychiatrist contacted him in advance. Yes. Qin Mo didn't deny it. His psychological condition isn't bad. He has 70% more self-defense awareness than the other fighting champions. The old general smiled and said, "What exactly do you like about him?" Skills and marksmanship. Of course, these aren't the main points. Most importantly, he gives off a feeling just by standing there, Qin Mo said slowly. The old general hadn't expected Qin Mo to pick his nephew because of his aura. Instantly, his interest was piqued. What feeling? I'm rich, I'm the crown prince. Qin Mo placed his teacup down. The old general choked with his words. This really wasn't a compliment? Why did it feel like this cold fellow was describing a nouveau riche? There are many people in the army, but once we are overseas, we need to consider all aspects. We need to pick the best out of the best. These people can't have a strong military aura on them. If not, they will be recognized the moment they disguise themselves. Their psychological qualities are even more important. After all, we are facing a hypnotist this time. Mercenary organizations also look at people's appearances. Qin Mo looked at the old general. Your nephew is smart, and with his unique aura, he is very suitable for this mission. The old general knew that the decisions of the personnel were approved by the higher-ups. When exactly do we set off? Qin Mo's gaze was calm. At 2 in the morning the day after tomorrow, the operation team will disappear from the army with the excuse of a military exercise. It's a level 1 overseas mission, and it isn't suitable to expose your identity there. Hence, even the troops have to keep it a secret. I understand, I'll arrange everything. At this point, the old commander raised his hand and patted his shoulder. I'll leave Yilong to you. Qin Mo stood up and straightened his military cap. His gaze was dark and his reply was a military salute. On the other side, Bojiu had changed into a new combat uniform after her shower. She had brought all the equipment, and even her shoes had been changed to brown military equipment. A German military knife hung behind her waist. She was checking the ammunition for the last time. The ammunition wasn't real. It was specially used by the army for military exercises. If it hit someone, they would automatically be knocked out. But the impact was still there. It would hurt a little when it hit her face. She reached out and lifted the black mask on her face, successfully covering her young and handsome face. Only a pair of extremely dark eyes could be seen. At this moment, the sky outside had darkened. Bojo held her rifle with one hand and entered the forest from the back of the training ground. Other than Crown Prince, no one else had seen her whereabouts. Prince had been running with weights as punishment. When he saw the slender figure about to enter the area, he ran over and said, "I have a feeling that the devil is hostile towards me. Can you persuade your cousin? I'm just an accomplice and you're the main culprit. How am I supposed to eat if I have to run so many laps?" Bojo replied insincerely, "If you don't eat dinner, you can lose weight. Also, you're thinking too much. Captain is so handsome. Why would he be hostile towards you?" "How would I know?" Prince was puzzled too, but as a good roommate he had to remind the youngster. "Pay attention when you go in. I think with that guy's sniping skills, he might be hiding there and waiting to shoot you in the head. Alright, have you played online games before? You'll get lucky and get chicken dinner. That's the logic. Don't die the moment you land." Chapter 1192. Stop bragging. You're younger than me. How can you be more experienced than me? Prince replied nonchalantly. Bojo shrugged. Without another word, she leaped into the forest. Her speed was shocking. The Crown Prince, who had just raised his head, swallowed hard. He had wanted to talk to the other party, but it was really annoying for him to run alone while carrying weights. However, this guy really didn't have much of a chance of winning against that team sniper. The new sniper thought the same way. He had entered the forest earlier than Bojo. They had discussed and decided to enter from different entrances, so that it would be easier to fight. That way, no one would be at a disadvantage. But when he had sent the sniper in, his roommate had said, "Are you really going to fight him? Honestly, he's just a technical soldier. He can't be compared to you. There's no point in fighting him. It's purely to make him back off. It's also to let him know that in the last drill, he single-handedly defeated the team over there, because of the sniper's cooperation. If this person doesn't even know these 2 points and stays in the army just because of his connections, there will be a lot of drawbacks when carrying out missions." Needless to say, the sniper was right. His roommate didn't stop him. The temperature in the forest was slightly lower than the training ground. It was because of the vegetation. The lush trees stood quietly, and the tips of the trees that seemed to pierce through the sky swayed gently with the breeze. The exposed roots on the ground intertwined with each other and grew intertwined, like brown pythons entwining together, making love to each other. In the depths of the dense and serene forest, the sounds of birds and insects could be heard from time to time. It gave the originally dull forest a mysterious vibe. Bojo was dressed in the same color combat uniform. She held the rifle in her hands and bent her body to search for the best shooting spot. At this moment, the two of them didn't know that besides them, there was another group of mercenaries planning to invade from the north. There was this group of mercenaries because of the hostage rescue. It was all because of the hostage rescue. When Kwang, who was outside the border, heard the news, he opened his eyes that had been in deep sleep. Then he pushed the person beside him away. As the boss of an organization, he didn't look ferocious at all. He was in his 40s, and he was wearing a white coat. It was easy for people to put down their guard. However, it was this person who, as a psychiatrist, used his knowledge to kill many people. This case was reported by many police departments, because the way he killed people was too horrifying. The reason why this person was special was because he had taught 2 students. No, it shouldn't be said that he taught her. It was because both of them had attended his classes. One of them was Qin Mo while the other was Fan Zibing, Fan Jia's brother. However, it was the same 2 people. The first one felt that his teaching style wasn't suitable for him, so he ended his elective early and chose to attend another professor's class. The second one became his disciple. It had to be said that both of them were outstanding in the field of psychology. However, the former was still weaker than the latter. This had always been Kwang's evaluation. In his heart, a person without any weaknesses was the strongest. Although Qin Mo's aptitude was better. However, he was no match for Fan Bing. Chapter 1193. Zibing had been able to leave a psychological suggestion for Qin Mo before he died. This wasn't something many people could do. In Kwang's eyes, a psychologist who had been hypnotized was useless. He didn't take the people who were stationed at the borders of Huaxia seriously. After all, they had successfully transported a huge batch of goods in the past. Who would have expected the recent increase in security? With his methods, his men had been captured. Kuang had heard that the ones who had captured him were a small team from the nearby army. He had heard that there was a person with good disguise skills. But regardless of whether they were good or not, they had dared to touch his men. He had only touched one of their soldiers. He wanted to let them know that they shouldn't keep trying to cut off his source of income. Kuang was good at psychological warfare and was clear about the defense. China was vast. The uninhabited zone was many meters long, and there were some places that couldn't be detected by radar. As long as they didn't enter China's airspace, it wasn't a problem to drive a military vehicle into the uninhabited zone. However, they were strict in terms of weapons. Kuang had already thought of a solution. It was just a few guns. This was the border after all. He wanted to let them know that China couldn't do anything to him at the moment. With so many hostages, Kuang wasn't afraid of anything. Furthermore, he had wanted to find Qin Mo for a long time. It was time for the person who had caused him to lose a leg to disappear completely. Kuang narrowed his eyes, glancing at the poppy in his hands. When he lifted the corners of his lips, it was a smile, but it gave off a sinister vibe that came from the depths of his heart. Fan Jia was standing in front of the computer, tapping on the keyboard. Kuang walked over. "How is it? Have you found the person?" "Not yet. I don't know what happened to him. He seems to have disappeared." Fan Jia's eyes were filled with disgust when she spoke. Kuang was wearing a white coat, his gait a little crooked. "Are you sure this person means something to Qin Mo?" "I'm sure." Fan Jia's eyes were still filled with sadness. "I don't know what he saw in her. She managed to get close to him just by dressing up as a man. Now that I think about it, this woman is rather scheming." Kuang glanced at Fan Jia. "Don't use your unnecessary emotions. The most important thing now is this person. Kidnap her so that Qin Mo will be captured." "Yes, master." In front of Kuang, Fang Jia had toned down her arrogance. After all, she hadn't been very successful in her mission in Huaxia. Originally, he thought that he could use those people on the internet to carry out business transportation. She hadn't expected Z to suddenly appear and mess up her plans. In reality, Fan Jia still didn't understand. Wasn't Z supposed to be dead? Why did it appear in Huaxia? In the end, Master found a way to find Z's base. She still hadn't grasped the opportunity and let Z kill a few of her people. In the past, her master always said that she was the most talented. But now, Fan Jia's eyes dimmed as she started typing again. Since she couldn't catch Z, she wanted that guy to die first. She recalled the youngster she had seen in China and instinctively disliked him. Now that she thought about it, her dislike wasn't without reason. Pretending to be a man to play esports was just to get Qin Mo. It was really disgusting. Just as Fan Jia was typing, Kuang's phone rang. He turned his head, his voice calm. "Have you arrived?" "Yes, boss, it's very simple. The defense here isn't much." In the forest, an Asian man held a phone in his hand. He was wearing a camouflage uniform and had already killed one of the guards from a certain team. He stepped on the bright red blood, and the person lying on the ground seemed to be trying to sound the alarm. Once again, he slit his throat with a military knife. Kuang listened to the commotion on the other end of the phone and smiled. "Not bad. We met a guard squatting in the forest. I have to say that the uniform boss made us wear is very useful. He thought we were from the neighboring team." The man looked like he was from Huaxia, but his accent was foreign. Kuang was very calm. "You have to be careful. You just entered the outer area. Think of a way to enter the inner area. Tell them that you were here, and leave some blood there." "Okay." The man smiled, licking the blood off the handle. "Let's go, brothers. Let's kill a few more people for fun." This group of people from the ungoverned land seemed to be born fearless. They didn't care which country they were at. In their hearts, it didn't matter if they were here. Many people were afraid of China's soldiers, but they weren't. "There seems to be light over there. It should be the other team that the man mentioned." One of the men with a tattoo on the back of his hand jumped down from the tree, pointing towards the 9 o'clock direction in the forest. His lips curved into a bloodthirsty smile. It was obvious that he had the best eyesight in the group. Usually, the ones with the best eyesight were the snipers. What are you waiting for? Let's let them feel the aura of death. It was just a group of 5, but they were arrogant as they drove into the uninhabited area. Honestly speaking, they weren't weak, but they were relying on their geographical location. Regardless of how strong the Chinese soldiers were, they might not be able to catch them in the forest. It was a piece of cake for them to harass them, kill a few people, and teach them a lesson. The sky darkened. In the forest, Bojo bent her back, her long legs moving forward skillfully. She just had to be wary of the bullets flying from the highest vantage point. She knew that the person was around her, waiting for her to fall into the trap. Bojo turned and used a tree to block herself. She started to lock onto the target again. If she was the sniper, which tree would she choose? The sniper, who had been hiding in the tree for a long time, had already adjusted his breathing. He had even lowered his body a little. His gun could almost sweep a few meters in all directions. As long as there was any movement, he would be able to see it and shoot. The technical soldier wouldn't be able to escape. However, the sniper was impressed by his courage. Even if he had gotten in because of his connections, he wasn't a coward since he had accepted his challenge. It was a pity. He would have to tell that person how important shooting was during a mission. The sniper's marksmanship was good, and he was one of the best among the recruits. Hence, he was confident. Chapter 1194. However, the newbie seemed to have forgotten something. A sniper was most afraid of being discovered and attacked from the back. Of course, most people wouldn't have thought of this. But Bojo was different. When she had been at the Fifth Avenue, she had relied on her judgment of the best vantage point to move through the darkness with ease. Besides, she was an assassin. Be it in the game or in real life, she was best at attacking from the back. The sniper obviously didn't know that in the esports industry, people like to call him the shadow killer. Under normal circumstances, the so-called shadow killer would sneak around to your back and give you the most fatal blow. Naturally, the sniper wasn't aware of this. In his mind, he had always been a technical soldier. A thick layer of clouds started to cover the sky above the forest, covering the entire moon. The night sky was as dark as ink. All that could be heard was the sniper trying his best to control his breathing. The sound was very soft and weak. It was a special adjustment made by the sniper to hide himself. He had his own calculations and his concealment skills were excellent. Indeed, Bojo didn't notice him. But when the youngster realized that he couldn't see where the sniper would cover him, he started to attack from the sniper's position. The wind in the forest was icy, freezing the air around him. There wasn't a single sound in the surroundings, other than the occasional chirping of insects. The sniper didn't move, observing everything in front of him. He might not be better than his opponent in terms of technique, but he would definitely be stronger in battle. Especially in such a forest, it wasn't just important to be familiar with the terrain, the natural conditions were also important. The temperature was cold today, making it hard for him to breathe. Besides, the quieter the surroundings, the more advantageous it was for him. That way, he would be able to see even the slightest movement in the grass. Just as the sniper was thinking about it, he saw something moving in the bushes in front of him. He raised his gun abruptly, adjusting his shooting angle, locking onto his target, and firing with unerring accuracy. The bullets used during the drill were more like rubber bullets, producing a low and dull sound that couldn't be heard if one wasn't close. The sniper knew he had hit the target, the bushes quietened down. He adjusted the line of sight again, and saw a wild rabbit lying there. It was gray with a little bit of white. It must have been digging in the haystack just now. Now that it was lying on the dark green grass, it was discovered. The sniper furrowed his brows, feeling that something was amiss. He adjusted his direction and scanned his surroundings. There was nothing. He was probably making a fuss out of nothing. While the sniper was thinking about all this, he didn't notice a faint black shadow swiftly circling behind him from the moment he raised his gun to shoot. The path it took was also very tricky, as though it didn't even cause a ripple in the water. The figure raised her eyes, and the moonlight shone into her eyes. There was a hint of evilness at the corner of her mouth. What a pity for the little gray rabbit. However, throwing stones to test the waters was indeed the fastest method. With that thought in mind, Bojio turned sideways and quickly hid herself. She was still wearing a black mask on her face. Even when she was lying on the ground, she didn't remove her mask. Chapter 1195. She tilted her head to the side, making one last adjustment to the distance. There wasn't a single person around, only the moonlight from Tsinghua University illuminating the youngster's side profile. Her tall nose bridge and bright eyes seemed to be unable to be suppressed by the darkness. Bojio wasn't best at long-range shooting, but she had seen the Almighty's demonstrations. Breathing was important, but it was equally important not to shoot recklessly. The sniper on the tree still did not understand that once the sniper fired and missed the target, it meant that the battle was already over. That was because the sniper's greatest fear was to have his position discovered. It was obvious that the shot that landed on the gray rabbit had forced the sniper into a passive position. They were all from the military, hence, they understood this point. Of course, the sniper hadn't expected someone to be lying in the bushes. He estimated the terrain and prepared to leave his current position. But at this moment, the first gunshot he had ever heard in his life rang out behind him. The speed was so fast that the sniper's eyes widened in disbelief. There was a flash of light. The sniper quickly moved his spear. But it was too late. The white smoke that rose from his body had revealed many things. Moreover, after he had been hit by the blank cartridge, he had felt a tremor and pain in his chest. If it had been a real bullet, his heart would have been blown apart. Did that person calculate that he would turn around, and that's why he shot down at this position? The impact from the blank cartridge caused him to take a step back. He had to grab onto the tree trunk to prevent himself from falling. It was a tricky angle. There was only a slight gap and he would have been killed in one shot. The sniper held onto the tree trunk, astonishment and shock filling his heart. He couldn't believe how the person had managed to find such an angle. Just because of a technical soldier? But the truth was that he had been killed in one shot. He hadn't been able to react in time. He hadn't even considered the possibility that the person had predicted his position and moved behind him to ambush him. He had been like a ghost in the night, silent. If the person hadn't fired at him, he wouldn't have been able to detect his position. This feeling made the sniper feel like he was really on the battlefield. It was over before it had even begun. If it was on the battlefield. He knew very well what it meant for their team's backline sniper to be eliminated like this. This meant that his blind confidence would kill his teammates. He thought he was aiming at someone, but in fact, he was already being aimed at. It was said that shooting was the key to becoming a sniper. In fact, a good sniper tested too many things, such as a stable mental state, and an analysis of the situation. However, he did not manage to do all of this today. The sniper froze on the spot, his entire body numb and stiff, as though he had lost all his strength. He leaned back against the tree trunk. Thinking about how terrible his previous performance was, he felt his face burning. He didn't even know what kind of situation his opponent was in, yet he could easily make a judgment. The facts proved that even if number 10 had connections, he was also capable. Chapter 1196. At this moment, the youngster, who had been lying in the bushes, stood up. She shook off the night dew on her body, her hair still carrying the scent of fresh grass. If she hadn't pulled her black mask away, it would have been hard to tell that there was another person there. The sniper watched the scene, his heart flipping over. Sweet, sour, bitter, and spicy. He didn't know what to feel. The youngster raised her gun, glancing over at him. It was obvious that he had won. The sniper chuckled bitterly, sliding down the tree trunk. In reality, the sniper was at a disadvantage against Bojio, who specialized in cutting the backline. As an esports assassin, Bojio was adept at fighting in the wild, capturing people and hiding in the bushes. Bojio didn't intend to stay in the forest for long since it was a deserted area. The temperature was freezing. Moreover, she wanted to use her new car to make the Almighty happy. She might not have experience in love, but she understood the process. 3 conditions. Heat up, heat up, heat up again. That was the only way to marry her. With that, she pulled her black mask over her face, preparing to leave. The sniper also saw through the young man's plan. He had lost this match and he would tell everyone about it. Through this match, he realized that the real battlefield might not be what he had imagined it to be. At this moment, neither of them noticed the silence in the forest. It was as though a ferocious beast was staring at them from the depths of the forest. It was the group of mercenaries that had reached the area. The 5 of them were extremely fast. The way they carried their spears was no different from the local soldiers stationed there. Since it was night time, they couldn't see each other's features. Hence, it was impossible to tell which country they were from. The only distinguishing feature was their military uniform. Just as the sniper was about to leave, he saw the figure moving past him. He paused in his action of raising his spear. Then he turned his head and grabbed the young man. He lowered his voice and said, "There seems to be someone here. Is it because of the military exercise again? Did they send scouts here first?" Bojio didn't think much of it. She smiled. "Let them scout, it's not a big deal." It was a habit to carry a backpack on one's back. But the moment she lowered her head, she seemed to hear something. The sound was very subtle, making it impossible to determine the exact location of the other party. But for one thing, was it like a language? Bojio couldn't hear it clearly, but she frowned suddenly. She took a step back in the direction she was originally heading towards, and leaned towards the direction where the voice was coming from. The sound of her footsteps was very soft. Only the sound of her clothes brushing against the grass could be heard. It was as if the night wind was blowing, very quiet. At that moment, the sniper finally witnessed the youth's ability to hide in the forest. It was so quiet that even his footsteps seemed to be judged according to the terrain. All his movements were hidden in the night. Not everyone he knew could do that. The closer Bojio got, the clearer the sound. However, the clearer it was, the easier it was to be discovered. The sniper was right behind her. The 2 of them had no idea what kind of danger they were about to step into. Chapter 1197. Bojio tilted her body and bent her waist slightly, so that she could hear the sound more clearly. But what came faster than the sound was the sudden smell of blood on the tip of his nose. That's right, it was the smell of blood. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any smell of blood here since they were using rubber bullets. It wasn't possible for them to cause any injuries. Bojio's frown deepened. At the same time, she tightened her grip on the rifle. At this moment, she heard the sound clearly. It was indeed a language, but it wasn't the language of Huaxia. It wasn't even the language of an ethnic minority. Instead, there was a mix of M and T languages. The person's voice wasn't loud either. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she was certain that they weren't Chinese. They weren't Chinese. They were wearing their camouflage uniform. Bojio's heart sank. She wanted to pull the sniper back and retreat. But at this moment, the sound not far away suddenly disappeared. It was as though a conversation had come to an abrupt end. There were a total of 5 mercenaries. The person standing in the middle seemed to have heard something. He stopped abruptly and made a shushing gesture. The others also stopped talking. Not only that, but they also exchanged glances with each other. It was clear that they had sensed something. Another prey had come knocking on their door. That was the first reaction of the 5 of them. Then, under the cover of the night, they turned and scanned their surroundings. Finally, they confirmed a point and raised the rifle in their hands. The person with the Bluetooth earpiece tilted his head. The strongest person in front smiled bloodthirstily. He threw a military knife out. With a swoosh, it slid through the bushes and shot straight at a rabbit. The sniper watched as the military knife flew past him. The youngster's reaction was extremely fast. Before the military knife could reach him, he had already moved the rabbit over. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that such a military knife wouldn't appear in such a place. It wasn't the equipment in their military unit. In the army, what weapons the garrison soldiers used, which models and what their functions were all kept secret. Only their own people knew, and no one would pick up the model, even if it was a military knife. The people on the other side were very fast. They didn't give the snipers any time to react and rushed over. The mercenary was dragged by the youngster, and he maintained his posture without moving. His entire body had merged with the grass beside him, and even his face was buried in it. This also meant that they couldn't see where the other party was. At first, the sniper didn't understand why the young man didn't leave immediately. After all, Rabbit was in front of him. He knew very well that if they had moved just now, they would have been killed just like this rabbit. The newcomer seemed to feel that the situation was a little boring and mumbled something. This time, the sniper's expression changed. This wasn't from his team, and he wasn't Chinese either. The sniper's reaction wasn't as fast as Bojio because of the difference in their perception of language. However, both of their hearts were the same. They couldn't sink any further. Chapter 1198. The person on the other side walked over to them. He even raised his rifle and touched the rabbit. The distance between them was less than a meter. The sniper's breathing tightened. It wasn't because he could see it, but because when someone was holding a rifle near you, you would definitely be able to sense the intense murderous aura. A rabbit. The person raised his rifle and picked up the gray rabbit. Bojio could understand his language and could hear the suspicion in his tone. Soon, the man raised his gun again and fired at the grassland. Bojio wanted to lift her head, but she lowered it once more. Fortunately, they were at a low altitude and weren't injured by the stray bullets. But the destructive power made her eyes sink. The other party was using a real rifle. That wasn't all, it was silenced. It was probably because they were in the forest and it had rained. Some of the defense systems at the border weren't perfect. This way, they wouldn't be discovered. Bojio probably didn't know what they were here for. But she knew she couldn't let them go any further. 1,000 meters away was China's first defense line. It was a common sight at the borders. Even the difference between Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia was due to this defense line. The inner circle was the country. Once they passed the defense line, there would be local villages. Even though there weren't many people living there, there would be scattered houses. This meant that there would be ordinary civilians living there. It was obvious what the defense line meant. Don't waste your bullets. The leader walked over and lowered his voice. Search and see if it's really a rabbit or someone else. The leader wasn't bothered. Even if there is someone, they will treat us as a unit. When we meet a patrol, we just have to keep quiet and let Bassoon answer, and we will be able to eliminate them. We'll leave after killing one more person, do you hear me? The leader was worried they wouldn't stop killing. After all, we have already entered China's borders. Once we are out of the forest, they won't be able to use their guns. Otherwise, it would be considered a breach of international law. But in this forest, once we are discovered, we will lose in terms of numbers. Hence, we have to restrain ourselves. After killing 3 people, we will leave our organization's name. This is the best way to provoke them, understand? Their hushed conversation traveled into Bojio's ears. After killing 3 people, they would kill one more? In other words, they had already killed 2 people? When? Where? If it was here, it was impossible for there to be no news to report. Could it be the regiment next door? After they had killed someone from the neighboring clan, they had jumped over here to continue killing. Organization? Bojio lowered her lids, a glint flashing past her eyes. It was cold. She thought she had a rough idea of which organization he was talking about. Recently, there was only one organization that they had made enemies with. It had to be said that these people were very fast and very agile. They were even bold and careful enough to sweep through the area just now. If it hadn't been for Bojio, she might have been shot even as she lay prone. After those people confirmed that there was nothing here, they didn't leave immediately. Instead, they expanded their search area. Such opponents were the most difficult to deal with. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.